Shabbat Shalom, Anu. Welcome all to this space. On this seventh day that we guard our Sabbath, we, Anu, rest from our work. As we align with the movement of the heavens, we align with the spirit of the heavens. We give honor to the Father, Mother of all the worlds. We honor Yah as the head and core of our being. We honor our ancestral spiritual warriors who have upheld the truth. We honor the righteous remnant who came before us. We affirm the sacred values of our nation that we have been charged to be stewards of. We affirm our responsibility to serve as a light to the lost nation of ancient Anu. We affirm our obligation to study natural law and align ourselves with them. We affirm our divine authority over the lower stages of our own faculties. Let us be filled with the changing winds of knowledge so that we will have the mind of Yah. Let us be filled with the energy of illumination so that we will have eyes to see. Let us be filled with the fortune of humility so that we will have ears to hear. Let us be filled with the serenity of deep water so that we will accept the prophecy of the Creator Spirit. We strive for fellowship. We strive for sovereignty. We strive to meet our highest evolution. We strive to be the curators of deep thought and wisdom. We strive to conduct ourselves with the dignity that our actualized selves demand. It is so.
Give thanks, Sister Munira. Shabbat Shalom, Anu. Shabbat Shalom and peace to all of you watching on YouTube. We bet you were expecting Chief to give today's Shabbat presentation. Surprise! It's us! So for those of you in Anu, we know some things that were canceled and it's like, well, what's going on? So this is what was going on. So today we have a very lively presentation for you and for those of you who are in the outer world watching. We are going to start our Shabbat here on YouTube, and then with our Anu members, we'll move to our private chat afterwards. So we are the Achiot, or women of House Anu, and we're going to grace you with today's message. Why? Well, in Anu, we have a covering initiative. Every woman is covered by an Anu man because in Anu, we actively work to reflect what family should be. It is that moving of spirit from Yah to the man and pouring down into the women and the children. We here are the sisters or achiot. Some of us imas. Achiot is the Hebrew word for sisters, or achot is sister, and ima is the Hebrew word for mother. So together we are the achiot of House Anu. So Anu ni he achiot lebanu. Bayit Anu. Bayit is Hebrew for house, and Anu is us, we. So it is the third day of the fourth month, and on this third day of the fourth month, we are wisdom manifesting the knowledge poured into us, and we are sharing our understanding with you. Today's presentation is going to be on the aspect of self. And I, along with my sisters here, my achiot here, are going to share with you 5 different aspects, starting with the body, the mind, the spirit, the soul, and the head. So I'm going to ask my achiot here to introduce themselves in order that we will be presenting.
Shalom, I'm Ima Precious, and I'll be presenting on the head, the body.
Shalom, my name is Ima Aquia, and I will be presenting on the mind.
I am Achot Deidre, and I will be presenting on spirit.
Shalom, I am Akot Munira, and I will share my understanding of soul.
Greetings, I am Achot Maksha, and I will be presenting the head.
So, without further ado, Ima Precious, take us away.
Body. Also known as the original Earth vehicle we ever get to drive. The first car I ever got the privilege of calling my own was what many would consider a hoopty. And if you have no idea what a hoopty is, let me tell y'all. All right. So, some of the things that can personify a hoopty is I may have had to juggle the key before the engine would fully turn over. Perhaps there were times when I was running late and I couldn't allow that car to warm up, There might be some squeaking of some wheels that might be a little old. But in it all, I felt that my little Betsy got me around just fine. That vehicle served its purpose. If I were a car, I wonder what my body would be. And if you were a hoopty, if you were a car, I want you to consider whether you would be a hoopty or not. I ask you to just consider what you're driving as your physical body. Let's take a deep dive. So, what is a body anyway? Yes, we each get one at birth, and it is a necessary part of the journey. It's as relevant and as important as our heart and brain. And of course, we learn a bit about it in biology, but how has it actually been defined? The Oxford Dictionary defines body as the physical structure of a human or animal, material frame, material existence of a human, or the main or principal part of an anything. Our New Way Spiritual Training Phase 1 describes the body as the vehicle for your spirit and soul, and goes on to state that the body is the tool for earthly transformation. The word transformation always makes me think of Transformers, and it takes me back to my brother's favorite Saturday morning cartoon, the show Transformers. Bumblebee's shift from a yellow car to a two-legged robot life form was swift and always based on an intended purpose. So our bodies too are a tool designed to alter and change swiftly based on how it is needed within its environment. We can begin to identify this idea of the body by considering a few of its unique abilities. A part of the body, the brain, which is literally a 10-ounce mound of fat and flesh. The brain and the body are one. You cannot have a purpose-driven body without a brain. Think of a child and how they learn about the idea of fire. There is no amount of explaining, no, no, no's, don't touch, or cautionary raised brows that helps a child connect that idea or what you're trying to communicate as fire being hot with their desire to actually want to touch and feel it for themselves. So ultimately, we as responsible parents have to create an experience for that child. We have to allow them to touch something warm enough that they'll recognize as fire, but still not hot enough to burn them. So as to trigger the reminder in their brain that fire equals hot. This is how our body and brain can work together. And what this does is it allows for us to have an unadulterated exploration of the earth. Another word that I want to dig into a little bit is the idea of what it is to adulterate something. So, to adulterate can mean to make impure, to spoil, taint, or tamper with. All of these alterations are really going to result in an inferior outcome. So when we are having an unadulterated experience, what we are doing is we are taking in the fullness of what that experience is intended to be without making any alterations or changes. Your body should be aligned with the movement of the earth. And your body should also function on one accord for the purpose of providing a physical experience for the soul. Though through the body, we are each afforded the opportunity for infinite experiences of the soul's mission on this planet or small plan, as Chief Yuya often distinguishes. Our vehicle, as it was provided for our assigned mission, is none other than our bodies. When all of our systems are optimized and functioning on their natural order, the possibilities are infinite for the avenues that we can explore through the soul's mission. Yet, if we take in inferior fuel, such as processed foods, live a sedentary lifestyle and seldom take long walks or exercise, or even allow toxic thoughts to permeate our mind, we may find ourselves to be more forgetful, sleepy, and even at times unmotivated to plan for future endeavors. Chief Yuya states, when you allow the body to weaken, it can become a hindrance to the gatekeeper and archivist responsibilities of the mind. That's from the Anu spiritual training. The somatic or physical experiences that we have in the world is taken in through our tentacles or five senses, and are all for the storing and collecting, archiving, as mentioned by Chief. So all that we do and all that we take in is really for storing and creating this chronicle or library within our body and brain. Your body, by way of the five senses, smell, taste, sight, hearing, and touch, work together in attempting to create the perception of what is happening in and around us. But remember that the body and brain are one. So it is the brain, the gray dual hemisphered organ in our head, that is the engine to our vehicle, the body.
The mind. When I think of the mind, I often think of how a thought enters in creating a battle. Thoughts of insecurities, fears, negative self talk, sadness, or anger. We battle these things without understanding why. And instead, we become comfortable with our mind battles, either learning different coping mechanisms or accepting them as part of ourselves. Anu Way states the masses of people in the world are not looking to move beyond their human trapping. Truth lies in this statement. Ask me how I know. The Anu Way also states the Anu experience is for those who are aligning with the mission of the bona fide awakening. We are to renovate within. We will begin with the brain. The brain is our consciousness. It can also be called the Ori. So keep note for the Ori. It is the most complex part of the human body. It interprets senses and controls body movements and behavior. According to Mind, Heart, and Words, it is the consciousness that provides the basis of life experience that the body interprets and processes. Our brain is divided in two hemispheres, left and right. The left hemisphere, which is the logical side, deals with knowledge, understanding, or how you perceive and make decisions. The right hemisphere, which is the creative side, deals with thinking, absorbing information from our senses and making connections. So the subconscious mind, anatomically, we're not able to see it, but it sits below the left and right brain. And we're not always aware of the subconscious mind, and it can be difficult to access. Our subconscious mind processes and learns from our experiences, and based on what it has learned, our mind will direct the course of our life. So I just wanted to give you a little story about how the subconscious and mind processes. So I was a little girl, and I used to go to the YMCA and to go swimming, and I love to dive off the diving board. And one day, which was the last day I dived off the diving board, I jumped and I did a backflip and I smacked my head on the diving board. And I ended up in the pool, and of course, in the water, but I was dazed and confused. My equilibrium was off. I had no bearings of where I was. And I was really scared, and I thought I was going to drown. And so I was finally taken out of the pool, and I had to recover for about a half hour, but I was looking over at that diving board, and as much as I wanted to do a backflip off of it again, my subconscious mind, convinced me not to. So I want to go back to what the consciousness does again, and the consciousness provides the basis of life experience that the body interprets and processes. So here we have my brain who has processed this event. I smacked my head on the board. I felt all this pain. I ended up in the pool. I'm dazed and confused. I'm scared because I think I'm going to drown. I don't know who sees me. And so my subconscious took all that information. And while I was sitting there reasoning about jumping back on that jumping board again, it convinced me, no, you can hit your head again and get knocked out. And who would get you? You would probably drown and fully be knocked out. So as much as I wanted to, and I think I probably should have, when they say if you fall off the horse, get back on again, I absolutely didn't do it, and I haven't got jumped off a diving board since. So how does our subconscious work with our left and right brain? In my heart words paraphrased, when we use logic, which is our left brain, or when we use creativity, our right brain, that same logic and creativity is used to support what the mind is urging us to feel, experience, or reinforce. So now we see it is the mind that is the underlying support of the right brain. The mind is the gateway to our spiritual experiences.
Spirit. As Ima Akuya just stated, the mind is the gateway to all spiritual experiences. So what is spiritual? So some definitions that are out there just on the internet says it's relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul opposed to material or physical things. So we're going to break that apart a little bit. What is spirit? And before you put things in the chat, it is not synonymous with soul. Spirit is breath. In Hebrew, the word for spirit is ruach. It also means wind or life force. In Yoruba, the word is emi. Emi is the breath of life. So spirit is the breath of life. Specifically, ruach hakodesh, the breath of life. That's the Holy Spirit. So some of you who have read the 14 Keys or have been listening to Chief Yuya's segments in the past will say, well, Chief says that inspire means to be spirit. And that's true. In the 14 Keys, it says inspire means to be in spirit. Spire or spirar is the root word for spiral and spirit. Spirit is breath. So to take in spirit is to take in breath. So what are we inspired by? What inspires us? What are we being infilled with or taking in, and how does it move the physical body? Spirit is unseen or hidden. So then how do we recognize it here on this physical, earthly, or temporal plane? How does it manifest in the physical and become material? And that's because it can be felt or sensed and then acted out through the body. How? Through the simple act of breathing. When we breathe, it is a form of reciprocity. It is an example of an exchange of spirit, inhaling and exhaling of the body. That's actually part of the autonomous nervous system, which means it's involuntary. So when we exhale unconsciously or naturally, we are impregnating those around us. So that means when we inhale, we have to think, what's impregnating us? There's that exchange. So let's look at the reciprocity of breathing and how it affects those around us and how we affect those around us. Who are we sharing breath with? Who are we sharing our space with? So I move around here in New York City. And so many of you, if you move around in spaces that have subways, we know that there are many people that move back and forth in the subways. We're sharing tight spaces, cramped spaces, dank air spaces, all sorts of interesting smells. Sometimes you will learn to breathe through your ears if you can. So when we think about those experiences, what are we taking in? All those different things, all those different people, what are we taking in and what are we giving to people? Pre-COVID, were we really vigilant about when we breathe and who we breathe around? I sometimes think about, people who have bad breath or breathe with their mouths open, and it's just like, what are you taking in? I was recently asked, if I'm walking down the street and I see somebody who's not wearing a mask, do I hold my breath? And I thought about it and I was like, I do. But I also sometimes, if I'm running, I don't wear a mask either. So is the other person holding their breath? So nowadays, we're really conscious about what we're taking in and what we're putting out. So I'm gonna give leave that as like a little cliffhanger and say, so then we have to think, what kind of spirit are we giving and receiving? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it ugly? Is it righteous or unrighteous? Remember, spirit is breath and not synonymous with soul.
Soul. What really matters in the long run? Now, this topic, it drew great interest for me because for years I questioned my own existence. I have been in different and many situations that otherwise should have provoked a more sympathetic response. And I felt like my lack of sympathy or compassion meant that I lacked soul. Like, am I soulless? You know, soul is the part of you that is eternal. And Chief Yuya, he always encourages us to dig deeper in our research to uncover the true meanings of things. So before I address soul, I want to first define the concept of eternity and eternal. So per Webster's dictionary, eternal can be defined as infinite, everlasting, timeless, uninterrupted, or perpetual. And from there, I began to look at other related words, and I went to Kether. So on the Kabbalistic tree of life, Kether sits below no other Sephirot. It is the crown and is above the mind's abilities of comprehension. And interesting enough, in Kether, you hear that word sound eth, like in ether, the formless consciousness, or ethereal. And that eth means divine. So all of these words are similar in meaning and expression of that which sits above and unchangeable and immortal. And I want to charge you all to do a little digging on yourselves so you can find the different meanings as well. In our new spiritual training, Chief Yuya describes soul as the non-judgmental, all-accepting portion of the supreme intelligence. It is that divine breath that is blown into man, mem, alf, noon, as in woman, man, and child. And that makes us real and not just the thought form. This breath of life, it gives us will. In fact, soul is nothing but pure intention and will. And without will, nothing moves. The moment we are given life, the movement towards our purpose begins. Soul has no cause but to promote the will of Yah. Recently in our new, we talked about doing that sober assessment and being objective. And within that sober assessment, you make many discoveries of yourself. You may feel like you don't have that will or push to move forward past your current station, but that doesn't mean that you lack soul, but you lack that conscious will and drive. And this happens when we are too closely tethered to personality. Personality being that thought form we receive from our ego and experiences, and what moves us on a human level. And once we come down um, into this realm of the physical, we are immediately corrupted. We fell into the darkness of humanity. Soul is constantly looking to rectify the corruption with truth. So, quite often, the terms spirit and soul are used interchangeably, but that would be incorrect. And Sister Deidre, she gave us some really in-depth points about the spirit, and I want to make sure that we have a clear distinction between spirit and soul. The soul is ethereal and without matter. The effects of the spirit is linked to the corporeal and is related to our physical material body. It is the emanating force of a thought form or a materialized notion. So, unlike soul, the spirit is not eternal, but it is created through thought. It is ever changing, and if you do not feed the spirit of a thing, it will lose its strength and dissipate. Spirit dictates our emotion and comprises our personality. The more we are connected to our human personality, the further we get away from the soul. Spirit is that lesser expression of the soul. It's the lower subjective part of us. It's when we become a part of what it is we are observing in life, as opposed to accepting it for what it is and allowing it to be. Spirit is changed by experiences. But the core of soul is truth. Soul is always looking to balance the corruption of life with truth. And we cover truth as it is presented to us in the 14 keys. Truth is the center of all in existence. Truth is the essence that lives in our souls, which directs our consciousness. And the understanding of this expands on the meaning of what was written in John 8 and 32. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Well, once there is a presence of truth and will, you will no longer be bound to the limitations of the realm of the spirit.
The head. So when I think of the head, the first thing that comes to me is the law of correspondence. Everything in the heavens will reflect everything on earth. Everything on earth will reflect in the heavens, or what is in the heavens. So, what is the head? The head, when I think of the head, I think of many different words that are equivalent to the head. The crown chakra. Kether is the crown, and the crown is that which surrounds our head, but it does not touch it. I also think about Resh. Resh is the 12th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and Resh can be transliterated to mean head or to imply head. For those of you who are familiar with the Rastafarian community, you may have heard the term Ras as well. Ras, similar to Resh, Ras is a Ge'ez term that can be transliterated to head or leadership. The actual meaning is Duke or Lord. So when you think about Duke and Lords or the title of Duke and Lord, we that brings us to the title of leadership, head. There's also a ruler of the head, right? There's also the idea of the head being a container. The head is a container. A container of what? We'll talk about that a little later on. It is also the Ori, and it is also related to consciousness. So, based on the works of Chief Yuya from Grasping the Root of Divine Power, we learn that the Ori or head is a head with multiple aspects. Just as we're dealing with the aspects of the self today, the Ori has multiple aspects. And I want to put up in here and say that our head has, we have a celestial head and we have an earthly head. And more of that will be explained later on. The aspects of the head, though, work in coalition with one another. So let's run through some of those aspects. We have the Ori, which is your conscious mind. And as stated before by Ima Akuya, the mind is the gateway to our spiritual experiences, right? We have the Ori Ara. The Ori Ara is that physical body temple, right? And Ima Precious delved and explored the physical body temple. She said to us that the body and the flesh brain are one. That's considered the body, and it is a vehicle for our spirit and our soul. The Ori Inu is our inner self. That is synonymous with the superconscious mind or supercognition. We have the Ori Paco. This is your connection to your extended family. And the Ori Paco can be connected to a locale on the physical body, which would be at the base of the neck. The Ori Iponri is the spirit double or the doppelganger. The Ori Iwaju, many of us know as the third eye chakra, right? But many of us also refer to it as the first eye. That is our clairvoyant portal, directly connected to what is intuition or intuiting. And we have the Oriatari, which is the transcendent cognition. That's the part that connects us to the spirit of ourselves that is in Orun or in the heavens, the celestial part of ourselves, right? So the Ori is a container. You see how we just touched on all those aspects of the Ori? It is a container, but it's a container of what we call supreme intelligence. It is our individual portion of divine breath. And Sister Deidre spoke to the idea of divine breath, the breath of Emi and the Ruach HaKodesh, which you'll touch on and expound on a little bit more. Ori is consciousness.
There is duality in all things: the head and body, sun and moon, man, woman, light, dark, all working to create balance. The head and body connection. Just as Yahweh Shai, the Messiah, is the head of the man, Anu Way Family Structure section states that the man is the head and the woman is the body. The body must be nourished and tended to in order to correctly function in tandem with the head. The physique is the active potency of transformation on the earth. The body traps, gestates, and unfurls the light of the head. The body should be free to do what it is directed to do. We, as Anu women, are charged with the responsibility to get into appropriate alignment with our body, brain, and divine mission. The earth element's connection to the body. We begin with dust and breath. In Genesis 2 and 7, the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. As an infant, our relationship to the earth is the first thing that is established. Oxygen and gravity, both synonymous with planet Earth, are right there waiting to greet us along with our parents. The earth is linked with the body from the very start. While the earth offers grounding, support, and sometimes hard, uncomfortable landings, similar to the one that Emma Aquia touched on in her share, it is important for us to recognize that the element of the earth is feminine. While the earth offers these hard, uncomfortable landings, it is all for the body to appreciate its structure and function on this plane. As a feminine element, it is malleable and nurturing, dark energy which cradles the light of the sun. When your earth becomes hardened, it can be like salt, encrusted, unyielding, and tough on the surface, causing a crystallization of thoughts and eventually mind. Like Lot's wife in the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah, when Lot was instructed to take his family and flee from the city to never look back, is what he was told. He, as the head, provided this instruction to his wife, but we kind of know how that story ends. She does not take heed to the instructions provided by her head and is thus forever known as the metaphoric personification of what we recognize as the biblical pillar of salt. I was actually wondering if perhaps she was already hardened in her old world attachments way before the formation of this said pillar. Maybe she actually clung to temporal nothingness. But because what she had gazed back upon was already being destroyed, in its destruction, she too became a casualty, if you will. This reminds me to ensure that my body and brain function as one. And as I touched on earlier, this is the only way that we can drive to our mission ordained by Yah. And I can only get here by honoring the guidance and walk of my head, or as Achot Deidre spoke to earlier, as women, we are to reflect the light of our covering. After all, each of our lives existed way before the physical body that we possess today. So there must be a grand plan behind why we're here, and a reason that our brain is this receptacle for storing information. As illustrated in Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. You are not your body. The totality of who you are is your soul, as I hope Munira touched on as well. Things that happen in the soul realm are balanced out in the physical realm, right here on earth. When I think of physically experiencing an earth, somehow it takes me to the feet and the value for grounding. So we've been talking about the child and the infant. And what you think about, after the birth, there are a few firsts, and one is that first step. An infant getting to a point where they establish their own autonomous relationship with the earth is such a special moment. We all recognize and celebrate it, but I wonder if we've ever considered how intrinsically important that relationship is. The feet and the ground. Earlier, I spoke about the idea of an unadulterated experience. Walking barefoot outside is something that I've learned to enjoy. My experience with the earth is deeply altered. My shoes, my heels in particular, socks, which I would never walk barefoot, not even in my own home in the past. And even my thoughts and beliefs about walking barefoot hindered my willingness to even consider it. I remember my grandmother just having really, really serious issues if our feet were dirty at any time for any reason, never mind if you were walking outside barefoot. So it was just taboo in my mind. But our feet can be linked to our vehicle, right? The vehicle of the body as our tires. So I want you to consider your tires. Are they stable? Are they ready to appropriately be planted on the earth? Or are they callous and numb, snagging and snarling everything in their path, just asking for some care and affection and attention? This can actually tell you a lot about, or it tells me, I would say, a lot about my rooting. In the Healthy Feet YouTube lecture, Chief Yuya spoke to the foot chakra and made a distinction between it and the root chakra. This particular chakra, the feet, sends earth energy up into the body. It also anchors and harmonizes energy within. So that's the balance that we were speaking to earlier. When upset, what is one of the first things you think about in order to get balanced? Or what are you told? Why don't you go take a walk? It is naturally go take a walk. Or you feel yourself ratcheting up and you say, I got to get out of here. So the only way to get out, because your vehicle or your feet or your tires, is to get up and physically remove yourself from that space, to walk, to have your feet touch the ground. This again is an example of the power of that foot chakra. Now let's talk about the tree huggers, or those known for being peaceful, honoring the earth, and perhaps they hug a tree or two. Think about the power of sitting on a tree, deeply rooted. The greater the roots, the wider the trunk, the more stable and comfortable it is for sitting. You don't usually approach a really slim, brand newly planted tree and decide to slump under it. Normally, it's one deeply rooted with lots of energy that can support exactly what it is you need in that moment. So I want to just close with a quick thought. No matter how you traverse this earth, remember to always walk good. And please recognize that our thought forms are spirit bodies. So guard your body by guarding your mind.
So I'm just going to bring a little more understanding of the mind. Our new spiritual training teaches that our mind contains spirits, and those spirits create thought forms. Our thought forms can either manifest in the physical or the spiritual realm. Our mind and brain are supposed to work as counterparts, allowing your spirit to pull from the heavenlies and manifest in the physical universe. So again, as Grasping the Root of Divine Power tells us, that the mind is the gateway to the spiritual experiences, meaning we must keep our mind open. In the Command of the Day teaching, The Right Mind, Chief explains the challenge occurs when our brain weaponizes itself against the spirit. That is the ego at work. How many times have we not carried out what our inner self has told us and we end up regretting it? That was the ego blocking the gateway for the spirit. The ego is the conscious mind, is the natural mind that is focused on the self. In the 14 keys, when the 14 keys states when the ego takes over completely, we convince ourselves that we are so special that the problem with the world and its inhabitants as we are resolute in our own viewpoint. So some characteristics of the ego that block the gateway of the mind are trying to cope with your own problems, trying to handle life, what life brings you without losing your human identity, avoiding things, being in denial, being defensive, substance abuse and addictions, as well as self-esteem. These are things that we have to rid ourselves of. We have to rid ourselves of the ego. And how do you know you're in order to do that, you have to cultivate your mind. And how do you know that you've cultivated your mind so that you can open that mind or that gateway so the spirit can move in the heavenlies? Well, you want to fill yourself with the spirit of the highest God. You want to be more aware of your thoughts. Get to know yourself. Reform yourself by setting righteous standards. Remove yourself from toxic environments. And you can even do simple things like affirmations, movement, or meditation. It's important to know that we receive our power from the knowledge, connection, and affiliation of the inner mind, which leads me to describing the law of mentalism, which I created in the abstract from Chief's podcast, The Law of Mentalism. So the law of mentalism contains the 7 Hermetic laws written by Tahuti. And Tahuti is known as the father of alchemy. Again, there are 7 laws, but I'll just touch on the law of mentalism, which deals with the alchemy of the mind. So the law of mentalism states the all is mind and the universe is mental. When speaking of the all, we're speaking of all things we call life. So life is the all, and life is an intelligence, and life is a mind, and all things in creation are a mind. Now, the mind itself is a womb, and it's a womb of all creation. Our mind is a womb that creates all things. That womb can create physical reality, or it can be the gateway to your spiritual reality. Your physical mind can block the gateway to the spiritual, which is your ego. And the ego creates a blockage to the crossroad of going to your higher place, which is your spiritual reality. Instead of going beyond the heart chakra, and the heart chakra is where the awakening or spiritual awareness happens, it goes to your root chakra, which is attached to the physical and material world. Here, the ego feels the need to control and have power over your physical environment or human identity. Within the law of mentalism, the brain is important in the created universe. Remember, it produces and processes for our spirit. But it's important to keep it sharpened so the mind can be opened. By opening the mind, you become the gatekeeper. Once the mind is closed through ego, you are now too invested in the root chakra, and you become primarily focused on what you can get. Through the gateway of your mind, which is your open mind, you tap into the aspect of the universe is mental. And going back to the all is mind, you're dealing with what we call heaven or the all in all. Well, what is the all in all? The spiritual unseen that lies beneath all of reality or the physical, that is the all, and the all is mental. So the all is the mind, and the all is looking for you to open its gateway so that the universe can expand. The universe is mental.
So we've heard a lot about the celestial down to the earth realm, divine versus physical and human. So with that, for the spirit, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between high spirit and low spirit. So remember, ruach, the Hebrew word for wind, spirit, or life force, is also paired with kodesh, which means holiness, sanctity, sacred place or object. So together, ruach hakodesh literally translates to the Holy Spirit. So let's start from the beginning. Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So let's talk about that last line. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So that first part, spirit, that is wind. This is the Ruach Kodesh, the Holy Spirit. When we are infilled with the Holy Spirit, we are filled with righteousness. Righteousness within the internal body awareness would display the law and ideal of the spirit body. What is the spirit? What spirit are we talking about? The Ruach Kodesh, the breath of life. So, as we've heard several times, the Anu family model is a reflection of what the Elohim has set for us to be. The spirit from the divine mind going down into the man, pouring into the woman, and pouring down to the child. In the Anu way, we learn about, we have an example of the love of a mother and wife to her homestead. And it states the dutiful woman prepares healthy foods for her children and consecrates all that she does with the love of the Ruach Kodesh, the Holy Spirit. So why Ruach Kodesh and not just Ruach? Because it's directly connected with the breath of life that comes from Yah. This is high spirit, the divine mind. Are we part of, so we have to think, are we part of righteous communities where we can select from a pool of righteous potential mates? Because if we're getting that Holy Spirit, that Ruach Kodesh pouring down through the family, that is what we should be moving in, the righteousness. But what if the man has low spirit? What if there's low spirit? If there's low spirit, then what gets poured? What gets poured into the homestead? So now I move into low spirit. Since it's breath that sustains life, is it possible that someone can have a life force and be low spirit? And so I'll give you 3 examples. So the first one, so take notes. Not everything has ME. It's not in everything. So that means it's not connected to Yah, the source. And we know that things that are not connected to the source have no what? They have no soul. So what if you just have Ruach? It's just wind, spirit, or life force. So then you have to ask, does Ruach or spirit, just the plain spirit, the spirit, come from the Most High? Who or what gave a thing its life force? If it's a product of the earthly realm, then it's not celestial. It's not from on high, and therefore it's low spirit. So another question is, okay, well, if it doesn't have ME or high spirit or Ruach Kodesh, then what spirit does it have? Or we could even say, well, how does the Ruach Kodesh flow through me, but I can also be in low spirit at the same time? So point number 2, and that's because we are evolving all the time. As we've heard before, the universe makes spirits, archetypes, and deities constantly. That thought and spirit are constantly feeding each other. And that's how we start to deal with plural, going from spirit to spirits. So I'm going to take us back a little bit to the verse about the Spirit of God moving over the waters. Water is emotion. So the spirit is a vehicle or drives emotion, energy and motion. So just like the Ruach Kodesh can move emotions, so can our thoughts. The predominant trigger for emotions is a thought. Spirit stimulates thought, and thought can create spirit. It's bidirectional. As we've heard from Sister Maksha, it's that law of correspondence. As above, so below. Third, spirit can also be likened to a lens with which we move or see reality. Note, it's not making your own truth. It also can be a mask we utilize for what we need or the character we want to manifest in the moment. As Sister Munira pointed out, when we give a thing or entity or being energy, thinking or speaking, we are breathing life into it. Breath is spirit. Spirit is breath. It is the expression from the source. So when we give that energy to a thing, we actually become the source for that spirit to pull from. Remember, it's bidirectional. So what comes to mind when we think being in low spirits? Sadness, depression, loneliness, anger, insecurities. All of these are signs that the spirit is misaligned or disconnected with the soul or soul's purpose. So that goes back to the question, how can the spirit of the how can the Ruach Kodesh move through me, but I be in low spirits? Because your spirit can be misaligned with the soul. During our Sabbath a few strongs ago, we presented on a scripture, the book of Ruth. And so there's a part in that book where we learn that Naomi, she's going through some things. Her husband has passed away. Her two sons has passed away. So she and her daughter-in-laws are these uncovered women in the world. So as she greets the women in the city when she goes back home to Bethlehem, she's like, don't call me Naomi anymore. Naomi, which means pleasant in Hebrew. She says, call me Mara. Mara means bitterness. So in that moment, she was taking on the spirit of bitterness because she's in her feelings about what happened to her in her life at that time. Does it mean that it's bad to feel bitter or angry? No, because she's hurt. And remember, there is no feeling with the law. It is what it is. So it only becomes a problem when one stays there. And then what happens is eventually you set off a chain of events that will be set in motion that continue to help disconnect from the soul and the soul's purpose. In the Anu way, we learned that mental meandering and misguidance permeate much of the world's organisms. As Anu, we scrutinize the dwelling places within us that errant ideas and spirits would seek to find their home in. So to clarify, spirits are constantly being created because creation is constant, because we are evolving. Chief has said it, it's like coloring within the contours and shapes that already exist. The more we see, the more we color. So the spirits are already present because our thoughts have been populating the universe, that mental, and as above, so below. We have spirits below, above, around, within us, left, front, side, back, everywhere. They will rule wherever we allow them in. They strive for survival and will feed wherever they can. The brain can be infested with spirit forms. When we get stuck in the earth, that earthly realm, we run the risk of being disconnected. So we heard about, making sure that we're connecting with the earth. That's the humility. We also have to make sure that there's a balance, that we're not getting stuck in those lower realms and that we're moving up to the higher realms and using our higher mind and moving to higher thought. When we are intentional, the spirit or lens or mask is selected because that's the character we need in the moment. So can you do something that's, higher and lower? Absolutely. But we have to remember, when we contract with contrived wickedness of the world, it's because we seek to do things that appease our own desires and opinions. That's that getting stuck in the earthly realm, our wants rather than our needs. We all have the ability to pick certain personality or energies or characteristics and then manifest it into reality. There are things that we can put in front of one another to inspire one another to be different. So that's being mindful of who we're sharing space with. What are we breathing in? What are we being impregnated with? And what are we impregnating into others? We must move toward the higher mind to maintain the connection to the soul. The Ruach HaKodesh, the breath of life, that high spirit, was bestowed for that purpose. Don't get disconnected. It will start to show in the physical. When our spirit is not in alignment with our ancestral mission, and more importantly, Yah, then that is where any disease or imbalance will start. In the 14 keys, it says the imbalance that spreads contamination throughout an organism always dawns in the orbit of spirit. It is our application of a balanced mind that will dictate what spirit or spirits we take on and what we give out. It's whether we maintain and sustain a high or low spirit.
So, Sister Deidre, you said that the spirit, it affects our physical body, right? So your spirit is directly related to our somatic experiences and how our senses are stimulated. So imagine spirit and soul as food, for example. A lot of us recognize that we have some challenges with food, our physical food, and how we eat. And the purpose of food is to sustain us and provide the minerals needed for the proper function of our body. So spirit would be you being sat at a table that was dressed in fine linens and china, and there's just this plethora of different foods. You have shrimp and chickens and hams, you got mac and cheese, cornbread and black eyed peas, right? Pretty much all the things that may taste good to some, but are in fact an abomination. Now, imagine going back into your own backyard and you have a garden of fruits and vegetables and roots that you have grown yourself. Or imagine being in the original garden. You're surrounded by all these foods that were specifically grown to keep you in balance. Now, this garden isn't fancy and it may even be considered boring, but it fulfills its purpose. The soul is always inclined towards movement to fulfill purpose. So when you get stuck in the realm of the five senses, the spirit realm, that results in an unfulfilled destiny. The soul is always on the journey to explore additional definition. Our spiritual personality and other spiritual entities are temporal thought forms that are only to be used as tools to assist you in achieving your soul's mission. They are always changing and therefore they are not real. They are just a projection of what we need to push us further and to expand. So when the mind, the body, and the spirit become servants to the soul, we are fully empowered by the only thing that is real. Essentially, there needs to be a death of personality and ego, a disconnection from what we create unconsciously so that we can consciously create life's causes through will. And to quote the Anu Way in the Kingdom section, Anu strives for spiritual regality, sanctification, and the perpetual walk that accompanies the discovery of our soul roots. We get back into alignment by removing fear and being fully accountable of our past experiences with the absence of guilt. And I say the absence of guilt because guilt suspends movement and stems from the ego that is birthed from our human experiences. So by staying obedient as we move to Zion, we make great strides in realizing our mission. Every righteous act that we have performed up until this moment has been in the fulfillment of our soul's purpose. We were led to believe that our purpose is related to our identity and doing something. Like, I came here to be a healer, or I'm a writer, or I'm supposed to be a farmer. But our true soul's mission speaks to just being, to be in this current moment and to give it our full attention. So, right in this moment, as we're all actively paying attention, if we are fully present, we are living our life's purpose. The now is the only thing that matters.
The now is what matters. And as Achille Manira stated, when we're staying obedient and moving towards Zion, we remain on our soul's purpose. And so, that brings us to the idea of the celestial head driving us forward, creating that standard of what we ought to stretch and move toward, and the earthly head. Let's go back to the Ori, the crown, or the head. The crown sits above the capabilities of the mind, right? It is the celestial head. And celestial means heavenly. So we know that it's operating from an objective space. It is not affected by the matter of this world, right? or the matters of this world. And when our head is not affected by human experience, that's our God self functioning, because it's removed from, again, the mundane of the world. The Ori Iwaju is only a gateway to the highest expression of ourselves. So we have our celestial head, but on our earthly head, we have the portal that allows us to experience the highest expression of ourselves. The other chakras are holders and containers of many different experiences. Now, signified by the crown chakra, the head is what controls our destiny. And your will comes through the crown chakra, which is developed through humility. And we've heard a lot of references to um, grounding and being humble, and humility is that hummus, it's that touching the earth. So touching the earth is necessary in order to attain or to move toward or stretch ourselves toward Kether, or the crown. And if you consider the way the tree of life, or the Kether, or the Sephiroth, the Kether is positioned, as Sister Manira stated, it is at the top. It is the topmost. And again, when we envision a crown on an earthly person with an earthly title, the crown sits on top of the head. The Kether sits on top, but is removed. Right. That's one important thing to remember. It is that celestial head removed from the mundane or the earthly experience. And so let's look at just the idea of the crown, right? And humility. The crown, or the head, is humble because it does not see itself. It sees our limbs. We could look down and we see our limbs, right? We see all the other parts, but the crown, or the celestial head, sits above the earthly head. It is constantly looking at the other parts of the chakras, and it is giving protection and initiating the different parts with divine energy. So we trust and have faith in that. And so there's humility in that, right? There's humility in being led. That's really what's important here, to see the dynamics between the earthly head and the celestial head, one leading the other. This goes back to our definitions in the beginning around Resh and Ras and leadership container. The crown is untouched. The crown is on it's unblemished, right? It's the unseen portion that represents what we aspire to. And it has to be unblemished and unseen, because again, we sit in the earthly realm, and in order, again, we can only be a reflection of our soul. We can't be soul sitting up here on earth in the physical. We can only reflect soul. So there's that idea again of the crown sitting above and being the standard to what we aspire to. And in order to lead, your celestial head has to remain removed from earth, right? It can't stay stuck in the muck and the mire. It can be affected by disillusionments, disappointments, the hitting of the head, as Ima Akuya mentioned, that hitting of the physical head when she did that dive, the celestial head has to sit above that in order to lead us. And in order to lead us, let's just touch a little bit on that, like to lead us through that experience of having the subconscious mind set the standard for what the box actually for what you're going to do and how you're going to function. The celestial head has to sit above that physical experience to move you through that so you can get through it, so to speak. So, maybe you'll be taking another dive pretty soon. I don't know, but again, the celestial head is what we strive for, right? And so as Anu, the Anu charges all of us. We're charged to strive to return to our celestial source. And what did I say celestial was? Celestial is our heavenly source. So that's that striving and stretching to meet the crown, right? That returns us. That return to the celestial source is what reawakens us. And when we truly evolve and when we awake into our path, we never know it, but it is along the course of the natural life happenings that we evolve to the greatest part of our being, right? It's the journey is a magic, right? That's that piece right there. That's really where the core of all of the evolution happens. So I wanted to shift just a little bit to back to the concept of the head and leadership. The head is leadership, and within a person, a homestead, family, community, leadership functions in similar fashion. It pulls it pulls us to grow and expand and to see and envision and maybe even understand things as the creator does. And if we think about our own leadership, we see that happening all the time. We're being pulled to grow in ways beyond what we even envision for ourselves. That's the crown, right? um, I'm going to take us back to the initial statement, the law of correspondence. Everything in the heavens will reflect everything on earth, and everything on earth will reflect what is in the heavens, or will be a reflection of what is in the heavens, or will be reflected in the heavens. This makes me think about Matthew 16 and 19. Matthew 16 states, I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. It's yours. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosened in heaven. That's another confirmation when it comes to correspondence, or the law of correspondence. Which brings me to this, that the crown is it's not just specific to our covering, or masculine, or masculinity, or the man, right? And I say that because the crown or rulership is a part of us. That, right? Remember, we all have Kether as well. Each individual one of us, we have an earthly head and a celestial head. And so the crown or rulership is a part of us that remains untouched, and it is not earthly. It functions beyond the corrupt human wickedness and weaknesses of desires and also affliction. So the Anui states this: when we create family, we are recreating the celestial makeup of our Elohim. This is why family is at the core of Anu. There is thought, which is father, there which is reflected in the celestial heavens as the sun. There is force, a mother, moon, and experience, the expanding transcendence, or the experience, which is children. That's why we hear sun, moon, stars all the time, right? And that, again, that goes back to the heavens reflecting in the earth, and the earth reflecting in the heavens. Our perpetuation of the natural family model is the greatest part of our faith. And in the midst of the family unit, we are in the midst of our creator. So there again, there's always that reflecting happening. There, to close, I wanted to say that there's no separation between the manifestation of our internal community and the manifestation of what is our outer community. Many times we separate what is going to be the mundane from the physical, and from the internal or the spiritual. But it's important to understand that there are reflections, and what is the earthly head will reflect, or should reflect, if it's in alignment, it should reflect the celestial head.
And so, with that, we will end here with the collective mic drop. That was my mouth spray. So, willingly, you have enjoyed and learned something today, or it has helped to enhance what you have already taken in and been poured into by Chief Yuya from Le Bayit Anu on this Shabbat. And there's some takeaways. Thank you for joining us on this spectrum, from the celestial to the earthly, the divine to the temporal, the spiritual to the physical. And so with that, we have a question to ask everyone. And so we'll take a few here live, and then the rest we will build on our private chat with our Anu members. And so for those of you who are catching this afterwards, thank you for joining us. And if there are any questions, please share them in the comments below. So, Ima Precious, the question.
Yes. So our closing question is using your body as a barometer. In what way is your mind, head, and spirit out of alignment with your soul?
So there's a slight delay. So what I'll do is, look through some of the comments in the chat and just give some salutations while we wait for the answers to come in. And once again, there's a 20-second delay, and we will take some questions here on live. If we don't, please put it in the comments and we'll respond as we can. And the remainder of the session will be continued in the private chat. So we just want to Shabbat Shalom and shout out to give thanks for joining us here on live, Brother Christopher, Achot Kashia, Safta Arlene, Aki Antonio, Aki Isaiah, Aki Zach, Ima Sequoia, Achot Shamanique, Abba, Mariutu, Aki Lo, greetings and thank you for joining us, Ipaco Bahamas, Abba Randy, greetings, Aki Verman, greetings, Mia L, thank you for joining us, and I think greetings, Abba Haru, and greetings, Timius Holt and Logan Scott. Thank you for joining us, Shabbat Shalom, and some of the comments. Give thanks that you enjoyed this session. And I do see a question, but it has been answered, and I'll read it out loud in case some of you missed it. So there was a question from Ipaco Bahamas, and yes, the question, and our question is in the chat. So there was a question from Ipaco Bahamas: what can we do to speak to the subconscious mind at will? And the answer to that question is the mind does not request information from Earth spirits, as the mind functions in a different dimension. The mind is a middle point between Yah's thought and matter. So give thanks that you enjoyed. So again, using your body as a barometer, in what way is your mind, body, and spirit out of alignment? So what we'll do, as we are awaiting some of the comments and questions, again, we are open for questions. We know that normally questions are not done for first Sabbath, but this definitely is open. So while we're waiting, I guess I will turn to Achiot Bayit Anu and ask, what some of our takeaways from this was. We all received this assignment 7 days ago. And as some of you, our new members know, there's a lot of cancellations this week. Like, we can't make it. We can't make it. The dance got canceled. Yoga was all over the place. Like, I don't know. We kind of were in and out of the movie breakdowns because we wanted to make sure that this presentation was done well and done right for you, and also the best representation of Anu and what Shibuya has spent years pouring out into the community. So we'll start with Ima Precious, the bodies. So what were some of your takeaways and learnings?
I think my greatest takeaway was actually how we are charged to personify reciprocity and what it actually requires for us to do so. So the fact that you acknowledged, and you're only touching the tip of the iceberg as far as what it took for the five of us to come together to attempt to share the light that we receive from our head really, really, really was my greatest takeaway. Just a deeper appreciation for what it is to show up every day and to produce something that is going to edify the collective. So, thanks.
Thanks. Ima Kuya, Miss Mind. Mega Mind.
Peace. Yeah, my greatest takeaway was really understanding how the subconscious processes, experiences and, information that it takes from the brain, and then correlating that with the root chakra and the heart chakra. I learned that I got an understanding really for the first time about what those chakras do. And I didn't realize that, the root chakra, although it's been spoken about, but really understanding that is where the grounding is, and that is where, how do you say, where you're really concerned with more of the physical, eating and, you know, um, just wants and needs, versus the heart chakra, where it is like the middle point, between your physical, and your spiritual, and is where you're coming into your awakening. So that's something that I learned, and I was appreciative, and just had a better understanding, of myself. Helped me to really think about, certain things that I'm facing, what, certain fears, what comes to my mind, and how do I process that? What am I feeding? What am I feeding my brain, and how is my subconscious processing that? And recognizing, oh, well, your subconscious, the ego gets in a lot of your ego gets in the way of that, and learning and understanding things that I can do, so I can open my mind.
Good, thanks. So for me, what I learned at first, it was like, well, why I gotta do spirit? What that mean? But as I went through it, I realized like this is a good lesson for you, because there was definitely some spirits exchanging going on in this brain as I was, pulling information and trying to make sure that I had the right stuff. Sister Maksha can tell you, some two for the whole 2 days, trying to make sure that everything was in its place. And I think having to go through the information and learn more and go deeper into what spirit is, and the Ruach HaKodesh, low spirits and high spirits, it actually made me like look at myself. And I even had to say, well, I'm in a low spirit right now. And I'm supposed to be an Anu woman reflecting the Ruach Kodesh. And I was literally an example of having low spirit, but being a being that was imbued with Ruach Kodesh. It is definitely possible. I had a real life experience with it. But I'm so grateful for doing it, because it was such a learning, it was an example of the doing. There's no way that you can take in knowledge without doing, because then it just becomes information, and that information becomes corrupted when it's just sitting stagnant. So that's my takeaway from this whole process. Achot Mira.
So yeah, my greatest takeaway was I was able to answer a lot of questions about myself, and I do have a soul. So I spent a lot of years um, focusing on the who that I am, and wanting to have this personality and be this, all these things that were related to my human experience and ego, that I was neglecting the what. So my takeaway is, it's not too bad being boring. You know what I mean? The thing is to get away from that who and get back to the what, because the what is the only real part of me.
Mhm. The what, right? The what. So there were so many things. There were so many things to learn and to take away and pull from this experience. One that I treasure the most is, you say doing. Yes, that deliberation and dialogue and conversation and pulling on all of the different aspects of the self, and just seeing every sister come forward with their understanding of that section, but they being able to infuse more information and knowledge and share their knowing with us, and watching how, just how that networking actually unfolded to a certain degree. I felt like Kether looking at all of it being orchestrated. I had to pull myself back and was like, wow, okay. And I said that to Sister Deidre. I said, wow, there is a master puppeteer working. And yeah, sometimes you don't know the why until you actually do. And it's in the doing the understanding comes. So there's that. There's also the portion for me that was very a personal learning experience, was looking at how the idea of celestial and earthly head actually correlates to not just family, but the natural phenomena, and also the idea of nation building. Because if we look at nation building, you'll see all of these aspects. The self is a nation, right? And maybe I'm wrong, correct me, but I was kind of, working with that concept and idea too, and thinking, well, what are the different aspects of, the self that are present in a nation. Those are things that are still questions for me, but takeaways as well.
I wanted to just add on to my original answer because I didn't offer, and I called Maksha, I like how you distinguish your personal lesson. I like that. So I'm going to borrow it. So I think while my overall lesson was regarding reciprocity, my personal lesson, my personal journey for the past strong um, was that I started when I received this assignment. My jaw was swollen about this far out, and I was in the bed for 3 days straight with a major, major, major tooth emergency, a toothache. Um, and so that desire to want to prepare, to want to study, and to, get on board with the new task was thwarted by something that was beyond my brain's ability to control. So I was assigned the body, and in that moment, I had so little control of what my body could actually do. And one of the things that I wound up doing when the discomfort was so unbearable was decide to just meditate. And I didn't even make these connections until I heard all of you share. But I literally could do all I could do was sit back, focus on one point in the ceiling, and stare until I could actually calm, like the feeling was no longer there, and I can get a sense of calmness within. And that really, what that connected to with today's message for me was something that I actually could never understand before, uh, just being, how to just be. I'm always with the pen and the paper. I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean? All right, just be, like, just be right here, right now. So just, okay, so just take notes. Just learn how to be. Do I look it up? Two simple letters. So clearly, lots of soul work to do here. And the good thing is, the soul is just there being, waiting for me, right? So I just wanted to share something a bit more personal about my greatest takeaway. Good things.
Give thanks.
Yeah, the soul's here for you, girl. Um, I think it's important to also recognize how our covering is so in tune with our needs and the things in the areas that we needed to work on and recognize within ourselves. Just shining that light on us so that we can gain that additional wisdom and understanding.
Give thanks. Yeah. So I am gonna move to the chat now and just highlight. We do have some responses. Oh, we're not gonna like. It's not a. Well, I'm gonna read the responses. um. So Brother Antonio says, his. I'm sorry, his disconnection. It showed up in his body. His feet and lower back are give him the most problems. And Brother Isaiah, Aki Isaiah, concurred. Also shared from Aki Antonio, mind. Issues with anxiety have plagued me in the past, but I have improved significantly since joining ANU. Give thanks. ANU is a hospital, right? Ipaco Bahamas says, in my body, I have much congestion around my first eye or Iwaju. It is that my processing is it that my processing of divine knowledge is clouded? And I think there might be an answer in the chat. So, and I'll read it as we go forward, but I'm going to continue. Brother Antonio says, Spirit, I have a lot of bloodline cleansing to do. And I usually track it through food cravings and what I am tempted to consume information wise as well. I have that same issue. And I talk about times like my issue with food and the whole like transitioning to plant-based. It still means that I have to watch like why what I eat and why I eat it, even though it's plant-based. There's chunky vegans, y'all. Like that's a real thing. Um Also with Sister Shamanique, she says, and it disappeared. I might have deleted it on this end, so we're just gonna go here. And Sister Shamanique, she says, great presentation. I feel she liked how everyone put their own examples, yet aligned with Anu doctrine, although it has improved drastically headaches. So her issue is headaches, imbalance of masculine and feminine. Brother Antonio says, there are many low spirit cravings that keep me out of alignment with soul. Brother Isaiah, his ego gets in the way and blocks his celestial mind. And remember, as we learned today, that ego is the sign of that getting stuck in the earth realm, in the wants rather than the needs, and not moving through those chakra prisons and going up to the celestial mind. Like, yes, we need to be grounded to maintain that humility, but you can't get stuck in the earthly realm, especially not when you are imbued with the breath of life from the Ruach HaKodesh, right? The high spirit and the low spirit. Brother Mari Utu says he's not in alignment with his natural, it's cut off. Livity diet, which leads to addiction and nerve issues. Brother Isaiah says, prevents him from connecting with his celestial mind. Safta Arlene says she receives better understanding of how to recover from her past and move into the here and now. And that's the soul, right? Achot Munira. That's the being in the present. Brother Logan Scott says his imbalance is the body. He experiences pain in his stomach after prolonged periods of fasting, perhaps a sign of things he needs to purge from lashing out for sustenance and survival. Ahot Maxine says, yes, it is interesting what comes up during fasting, Brother Logan. Yes, and we all just came off of our vernal. It's horrible. I'm off with my seasons. Vernal equinox fast. Some of us did dry, some of us did liquid, some of us did like eating after night, but there's always things that you learn about yourself when you're fasting. And which, by the way, speaking of fasting, Ramadan is upon us. It is coming up in maybe a few days, I should say, on the April 12th. And so, as I knew, we do recognize Ramadan. And so, willing all of you will join us in the fast. And for the Low says he would say his thoughts bring his mind out of alignment because his thoughts can stray off to various directions. Brother Logan says also cravings for unhealthy foods and sometimes alcohol, which I know is something most of my Agun had issues with. So we learned a few Sabbats ago about redemption, right? And what we have to renounce in our bloodline. So it's not just renouncing our own behaviors, but renouncing in the bloodlines. So it is about 1:30. So it's actually 1:28, but we're going to stop here. And so we're going to ask that our Anu members join us in the private chat. Give thanks for all of you for joining us on this Shabbat, on this live. And we are very pleased that you enjoyed the discussion. And we're going to build more in our private chat. So I'm going to say with that, Shabbat Shalom. Open it to the sisters to say your farewells.
Shalom.
Shalom. Thank
Shalom.
you.
Give thanks for joining us.